Let's turn back now to the southern border. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, made his first trip there. The trip is part of the Trump administration's show of force to tackle what President Trump called a national emergency. Here to tell us more about that trip is CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. All right. So, Camilo, I just want to get some more clarity on what is happening at the southern border. You know that the president has put a pause on the tariffs that he sought to impose on Mexico and Canada. Mexico, he says, agreed to put 10,000 troops on the southern border and to continue to engage with best efforts to limit the number of migrants crossing into the United States. Can you describe what the situation on the ground was like before the president announced that this deal had been reached?
That's a critical question, Vlad, because we have to underscore that when President Trump took this action, illegal border crossings were already at a 4-year low. They plunged last year after reaching record highs in 2023 and 2022 under President Biden, mainly because of an increase in Mexican efforts to stop and delay migrants from reaching the U.S. Mexico border in the first place. Mexican officials last year dramatically ramped up efforts, Vlad, to stop migrants from boarding buses and trains that would get them further into Mexico and closer to the American border. And of course, President Biden issued his own asylum crackdown in June of 2024 last year that essentially disqualified most migrants from asylum. Now, of course, President Trump has issued a more sweeping crackdown on asylum that essentially has shut down the asylum system and closed it down to most people who are crossing the border without proper documents. But that is really important to note that Mexico is already helping the U.S. in a very significant way to handle these very complex and vexing immigration challenges before President Trump threatened to impose tariffs on Mexico. And Canada as well was also helping the U.S. stem the flow of fentanyl and illegal crossings along the U.S.-Canada border, which we should also note pale in comparison to the sheer number of people who have been crossing the border and the sheer number of drugs intercepted at the southern border.
Right. So I'm trying to understand what the purpose of the Secretary of Defense, a cabinet level position, obviously making a show of appearing at the southern border. What message is that trying to send, and what the possibilities of what could come next with regards to our troops on the southern border might look like? As you know, and because you covered it, we had former Governor Kristi Noem, who's now the head of the Department of Homeland Security, also decked out in immigration cosplay during knockdown raids here in New York City, where they were going into apartment buildings in the Bronx as if they were in war-torn Afghanistan. I'm trying to understand what the performative nature of all that means and what it's trying to signal.
Well, look, Vlad, multiple things can be true at the same time. The Trump administration is indeed enlisting the vast resources and manpower of the U.S. military to aid in immigration and border enforcement. In some ways, that operational work is the same work that the military has been carrying out at the U.S.-Mexico border for a long time under Republican and Democratic presidents. That includes the administration of President Joe Biden, who also deployed troops to the border. And right now, many of those troops are doing the same operational tasks, like erecting border barriers to repel people from crossing into the U.S. illegally, and providing other operational and administrative assistance to Border Patrol, so Border Patrol agents, Vlad, can actually focus on their jobs of interdicting illicit drugs and migrants. But in some ways, what the military is doing now is unprecedented and new, and that includes that military planes now are being used to deport migrants to countries like Ecuador, Guatemala, Peru, Honduras, and now India. We saw the military send a deportation flight to India yesterday, according to U.S. officials. And so that work that the military is doing, Vlad, is changing and is helping the administration really fulfill this promise to, hopefully, in their eyes, oversee the largest deportation operation in American history.
So just for clarity, Camilo, they deported migrants from India back to India?
That's right, yes.
Okay. So yeah, as you rightly point out, that there has been an issue at the border with migrants crossing into the United States. It's become unprecedented. As you know, numerous presidents, Biden, when
Yes.
Trump was president the first time around, Barack Obama, George W. Bush have all tried to tackle this issue. I guess the question going forward is, given that we're at a 4-year low of the number of migrants crossing into the country, how will things be different with these new tactics that the Secretary of Defense is suggesting?
That is such a critical question because even though border crossings are at a 4-year low and migration has basically been brought to a standstill in most of the Western Hemisphere, including migration transit routes like the Darien Gap that divides Panama and Colombia, in the spring, historically, Vlad, we have seen a sharp increase in migration year over year as the weather gets warmer and as more migrants are able to travel to the U.S. border. So we should expect migration to increase at some point later in the year. The open question is whether the U.S. can continue to rely on Mexico to stop many of these migrants from getting here in the first place. And obviously, the administration is betting on, these threats of tariffs to do that exact work, to pressure Mexico to continue this work. Because again, if Mexico does not, the idea is that they will be penalized and punished.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see why the president would use that bully pulpit to accomplish that. All right, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate it. Always love having you on the show.
Thanks, Vlad.